Hello BookTube! Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books, and this is my first monthly recommendations video. Now I know it's a little late in January, but one of the goals I set for 2016 was to participate in one of the BookTube groups that everyone is always making videos for. Well, I've been watching, and I almost always watch the Tuesday videos that are sponsored by Janie and Janelle, and I watch the Top 5 Wednesdays that's sponsored by Ginger Reads Salerni. And last year when Kayla and Trina from Between Chapters started their monthly recommendations group, I thought, now that is probably a group I can manage to participate in, because on Tuesdays is the day I work my theme park job, and I have to be available from AM to PM, and I never know what shift I'm going to get scheduled. And Wednesdays is just a busy day running errands and doing things, and my daughter has youth group in the evening, we have church, and so Wednesday is just sometimes a crazy day. Sometimes it's early release from school, so I can't really do Top 5 Wednesday with any regularity. But the monthly recommendations, I think I can handle. One video a month, I think I can do that. For the month of January, you've probably already seen several other videos. If you haven't watched Kayla's or Trina's, I will link those down below. The monthly recommendations topic for January is fantasy. Now, I'm not a huge fantasy reader. Don't know that I've really read much of any adult fantasy. So almost everything I'm going to be showing you today is either YA or middle grade fantasy. Really, the majority of it is middle grade. Now, of course, the obvious things that come to mind when you think of fantasy is J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit, and the 3 Lord of the Rings books. I have read these multiple times, and I guess they're considered YA. So, of course, they're loved by all ages of adults. But if you want to try fantasy at all, then you just can't go wrong with these books. I think the first time I read them was college, and then I read them again later on in adulthood, and then I have listened to them on audio since then, and just loved them. I can't even they're just so good. In fact, I showed this in a haul in 2015. This is the annotated Hobbit, and I picked this up at a book sale last year sometime, and I'm planning to reread The Hobbit this year and read it out of this version. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. Speaking of classic fantasy, Chronicles of Narnia is also one that I would definitely recommend. I only have a couple of them here. I have not collected these books. In fact, I picked these books up at a book sale this past weekend to put in the little free library downtown. This is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader and The Horse and His Boy. These actually are 2 of my favorites. These 2 and The Silver Chair are probably my top 3 of the 7 different Chronicles of Narnia books. And so definitely you should read these. I would read them in publication order, though, not chronological order if you read these books. The only fantasy that I remember having a really big impact on me when I was younger is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. I have reread this as an adult, and I still thoroughly loved it. I just think the world of this book. It is a really wonderful story about a little mouse, Mrs. Frisby, and she has a routine. She lives at the edge of a field, and every summer and winter she has to move. Her winter home always gets plowed over in the spring and summer, and so she has to move to another location, but then it's not appropriate to stay in that location, so she always moves back. So every year she moves. Well, this one particular year, one of her children is sick, and he absolutely cannot move. He will die if he is moved. And so the time is getting close that she's needing to move, and so she doesn't know what to do. If she stays, she's dead, and if she moves her son, then he's dead. So someone, I believe, it's been a while now since I've read it, one of the other animals says that she needs to go to the rats. Well, she has seen these rats before off, in the distance, and they seem to be rather elusive and mystical. So she's never really had any interaction with the rats, but she finds out that her late husband was a friend of the rats. And if she goes to the rats and tells them that she's Mrs. Frisby, they will help. Well, so she does. And these rats are amazing. I don't want to give it away, but oh my goodness. As a kid, this was just the ultimate story. I love this book so much. The rest of the books that I'm going to recommend to you today are books that I've read as an adult, although they are middle grade or YA books. I am excited that I kind of got re-inspired as an adult to read some children's literature, and then I've been able to recommend books to my daughter. So let me show you a few of the fantasy books that I particularly enjoy. This is a series I started reading last year, and I only have one left to read. This is a series by Suzanne Collins, who also wrote The Hunger Games, and this is the Underland Chronicles. Gregor the Overlander is the first book. Gregor stumbles into a magical land that's underneath the surface of the earth, and it is inhabited by giant cockroaches and giant bats and giant spiders and also people. So it's a very, very good series. I have enjoyed it thoroughly. My husband and I have both listened to the first 4 books on audio, but my daughter Katie has told me that I simply must read the 5th one in physical book. I only have 3 of the books. I have the first one, Gregor the Overlander. This is the 3rd one, Gregor and the Curse of the Warmbloods, and then Gregor and the Coat of Claw. I picked up this hardback. I'm really just trying to collect the paperbacks, but I picked this one up to donate to our school library, and Katie is so adamant about me reading it that I'm going to read it first, since this is the last one I need to read in the series, and then I'm going to donate it. Another series I've read in the last few years is The Guardians of Ga'Hoole by Catherine Lasky. These books, there's about 12 or 15, I believe. I don't know if there's 12 books or 15 books in this series, but I've read all of them, and they are a fantasy series about owls. Now, there was a movie that was kind of a mashup of the first 3 novels that it was all kind of changed around, so I wouldn't recommend watching the movie until you've read the books. But these are just wonderful. I learned so much about owls just from reading this. You could tell that the author did extensive study about the actual habits and habitats of owls before writing this book. But of course, it's a fantasy series about owls and their life. The first few books are about our main character, Soren, who is trying to find the mystical land, the mystical Ga'Hoole tree, where apparently the wisest owls live. And I won't go into any more than that, but it's just really, really good. This is another series that Catherine Lasky wrote that takes place in the same world as the Guardians of Ga'Hoole, but it is some years after the story of Soren. These are called Wolves of the Beyond, and the wolves are connected to the owls. They work together, and they are comrades, if you will, against some of the other creatures who are trying to mess things up. Both of these series are futuristic. They do make references to the others, and those you assume are people. There are a few artifacts and places, stone buildings that are left over with different books and things, and the owls have taught themselves to read, and so they are but there are no humans left in this world that they live in, and so they only learn a little bit about people through some of the artifacts that they have found. So as far as the wolves go, this centers around a young wolf who was deformed, and he should have been left for dead. Mother did not want to leave him for dead, and she tried to, as I recall, she tried to get away with him, and but he was found, and the wolf who's in charge of making sure that deformed wolves are left for dead left him for dead, but he was found by a bear. And the bear, who was barren and didn't have any children, found this baby wolf cub and took it in and raised it as her own. So this story, the first book is called Lone Wolf, and it's his kind of growing up and realizing that he's different, he's not a bear, that he's really a wolf, and then finding the other wolves and how and whether they accept him or don't accept him. It's just really, it's a great story. It's a wonderful fantasy story. I have enjoyed both these series. I have not finished the Wolves of the Beyond. I've only read the first 3, and then I got sidetracked with other things, so I need to get back to them. But these are great books as well. Now, while we're talking about animal fantasy, this is a series that my daughter has been wanting me to read, and I have promised her that I would read at least the first one. I got her several of these books for Christmas. This is the very first one of the very first series called Into the Wild. It's called Warriors by Erin Hunter, and it's about cats. And that's really as much as I know. I have read the first couple of chapters a couple of times, and I just had a hard time getting into it. I love cats, but for some reason I'm having a hard time with this one. But it starts out, this first book, with a house cat who decides to go into the wild and become one of the clan feral cats that he has met out in the wild. And so he just one day decides to go and not look back. And so that's the story. Another fantasy book I read last year is The Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz. This is a Descendants novel, and I just looked this up and discovered that there is going to be another Descendants novel coming out later this year, and it's called Return to Isle of the Lost. So I'm looking forward to that. This is a fun book about Disney villains' children, and there was a Disney Channel movie last year, and they also have an ongoing animated series called Wicked World, and this book is the prequel to all of those things that have been on Disney Channel. So I don't know what the next book will be, but sounds like they're going to return to the Isle of the Lost. Now, while I am talking about Disney books, there's another Disney fantasy series that I would definitely recommend, and that is the Kingdom Keepers series. I've only read the first 2 of these books, and I was planning on reading the rest of them on audio, but lately I have come across some of the later books in the series that I have not read yet, and they were too good of a deal to pass up. So I will show you those in just a second. But this first book is called Disney After Dark, and it's about this group of kids who are holographic spokespeople for Disney, and they get into this whole mystical, magical world of Disney villains, and the Disney villains come to life, and they have to kind of combat them, and there's some really interesting, fun scenes where they go through different parts of Disney that, of course, I recognize. I live right here in Central Florida. I've been to Disney a lot. It's been several years since I read the first 2 of these, so I should really get back into these. Now that I have recently acquired some of the books, I am going to be picking these back up as soon as I can. This one I also have read. This is Disney at Dawn. This is the second one. I went to show you number 3, and I realized the camera was sitting on it so that the camera would be elevated a little bit, and so I had to change. So if there's a slight camera angle change, then that's why. The third one is Disney in Shadow, and I have not read this one, but I found this beautiful hardcover copy at a book sale recently, and it's gorgeous. Book number 4 is called Power Play. And I don't have 5 and 6, but I do have 7. This is called The Insider. So we'll have to get 5 and 6, but I was excited to find these. This one came through our library book sale, and then these 2 I found at, I think, a thrift store recently. So I was excited to find these. These are nice hardcover copies. And these Kingdom Keepers books are by Ridley Pearson. This is the most recent fantasy book that I've read. I believe this is a YA book. This is by Rick Riordan, The Sword of Summer, which is the first book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. I started this January 1st and read a good bit of it, and then I set it aside to do the TBR Takedown 3.0 because it's a little bit long for a readathon. And then I picked it back up after that was over and finished it, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series, and this is one of the very few brand new books that I have bought. I went to a Rick Riordan live event last year in October, right after this came out. This was an excellent book. I really, really enjoyed it. And, you know, you learn right in the beginning that Magnus dies. And you think, well, that's kind of a downer, but it's okay. The afterlife that he experiences is another life. It's an afterlife. So and he still has connections with the mortal world, and so it's really good. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I have learned a little bit about Norse mythology, so I will be looking forward to picking up the next one of the series when it comes out. Now, speaking of mythology, I would recommend anything by Rick Riordan. He has I have not read all of the Kane Chronicles. I've read only the first one, but I've read all of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian books, as well as the Heroes of Olympus, and all of those are wonderful, excellent fantasy books. I don't own any of them. I just read them from the library, but I would definitely recommend picking those up if you have not already. A few other fantasy books that I don't own, but I was thinking that I would definitely recommend. A Court of Thorns and Roses. I read that last year. It was a real page turner for me. I had a hard time putting it down. I remember one night I sat up until 2 in the morning because I just kept reading. Also, Far, Far Away. I heard Casey from A Basket Casey Reads talking about this not too long ago. I read Far, Far Away last year on audio, and I thought it was an excellent book. It is about a boy who can hear a ghost. He can hear ghosts, and the ghost that he hears most frequently is one of the brothers Grimm, and so they develop a friendship. But then it's very dark. You think, oh, this is what this is going to be about. Then all of a sudden, wham, everything goes wrong, and so it totally went in a direction I was not expecting, and I thought it was an excellent book. I'm going to read Ink Spell this year as a book to meet that challenge. And then one more series that I want to mention. I've had these books in my possession, but I have donated them to teachers for their classroom libraries or to Little Free Library. But the series that I'm thinking of right now is the Indian in the Cupboard series. I just thought that was fabulous. I listened to that whole series on audio, and I would definitely recommend it. It's about a magical cupboard. It kind of really sounds kind of like a medicine cabinet in the description, but this when the main character puts his figurines inside the cupboard and then opens it again, they magically come to life. So it's just really, I think it's a mind-blowing concept, and I thought it was fascinating. So I definitely would recommend the Indian in the Cupboard books. A couple of other things on my fantasy TBR. I want to read The Inquisitor's Mark. This is book 2 in the 8th Day series. I don't have a copy of the 8th Day, but that is also a very good fantasy book. It's a middle grade book that I read this past year. I do have a review of it on my channel, and it is a book about these people who can experience an 8th day of the week, and it is really unique. And also they are descendants of some of the Arthurian characters, so they have ties to King Arthur and Merlin, and it's very good. Some other books on my fantasy TBR are some Wizard of Oz books. I have 4 books out of the first 6 that I have picked up fairly recently. I have The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and these are by L. Frank Baum, and I have The Emerald City of Oz, and Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and The Marvelous Land of Oz. I don't know if I'll read the whole series, since I have recently discovered that there's almost 50 of them, but I do want to read the first few, especially the first one. So these are on my own fantasy TBR list. And so what's on your fantasy TBR list? If you have done a monthly recommendations video of fantasy books, let me know about it. And if you don't do videos, just tell me some of fantasy books that you recommend as well. So I guess that's all of the fantasy recommendations that I have for you. I understand that next month is going to be not romances. I already know what I'm going to recommend for February, and I will try to get that video done a lot earlier in the month. So anyway, I guess that's all I have for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.